Hi everyone, I'm Jacob from How to Become, and in this video we're going to be looking at the types of question in the critical thinking test. Critical thinking tests, such as the Watson-Glaser test, contain 5 different kinds of question. In the last video, we took a general look at the critical thinking test. Today we're going to go into more detail on each of the 5 kinds of question you'll find in the critical thinking test. These 5 types of question are assumptions, inferences, interpretations, deductions, and the evaluation of arguments. Let's start with assumptions. An assumption is a claim that is accepted as the truth without sufficient evidence. Assumptions are an issue for critical thinkers because, as a rule, claims made without factual evidence are unhelpful and can be misleading. For example, imagine you worked at a company and the success and survival of it depended on a continued market demand for DVDs. If, at the start of each financial year, executives at the company agree that DVDs would continue to sell based on zero evidence, this would be an assumption. This could be dangerous since the sales of DVDs could suddenly drop, leaving the company in a difficult position. For this reason, it's important to avoid making assumptions in the working world. In the critical thinking test, you'll be given a statement. Following this, there'll be 3 further claims. You'll have to figure out which of the claims, if any, are assumptions that the initial statement is making or relying on. The trick to this kind of question is that you need to read between the lines of the initial statement. Think about which of the claims are required to be true in order for the initial claim to also be true. For each claim, you'll have to say whether they are assumptions made by the statement, yes, or whether they aren't implied by the statement, no. Take a look at the following sample question. If I go down to the pond today, the only birds I will see are swans. So the 3 claims are, claim 1, there'll be no ducks at the pond. Claim 2, all swans are white. And claim 3, there will be swans at the pond today. Answers to these questions will be available in the next video. Now let's move on to inferences. When someone infers something or makes an inference, then they are coming to a conclusion which is based on evidence. Logic, whether inductive or deductive, is applied to this evidence, which in turn brings the individual to their conclusion. When someone makes an inference, they're commonly seen as reading between the lines, figuring out a conclusion that isn't explicit but rather implied from the evidence. Inferences are different to assumptions because they are based at least on some evidence. However, inferences aren't always correct and shouldn't be accepted as truth. While an inference might seem correct, it's entirely possible that it's overlooking other possibilities. In the critical thinking test, an inference-focused question will test your ability to decide the likelihood of an inference being true or false. You'll be presented with a short passage followed by 3 inferences drawn from it. For each inference, you will have to choose one of the following. Definitely true, which means, given all of the information in the passage, it is certainly the case that the inference is correct. Probably true, which means that, given all of the information in the passage, it is likely the inference is correct, however, it is not guaranteed. Insufficient data to say whether it is true or false, which means, given all of the information in the passage, it is impossible to say whether the inference is true or false. Probably false, which means, given all of the information in the passage, it is likely that the inference is incorrect. However, this is not guaranteed. And finally, definitely false. Given all of the information in the passage, it is impossible for the inference to be correct. Take a look at the following passage and 3 inferences. Scientific studies have discovered a link between chewing gum and better performance when it comes to tests. Researchers believe that this is because the act of chewing gum correlates with heightened activity in the hippocampus, the region of the brain which handles memory. When activity in the hippocampus is increased, it appears as though the ability to recall memories is strengthened. Inference 1. Chewing gum causes heightened activity in the hippocampus. Inference 2. There is a correlation between chewing gum and better recollection of memories. And inference 3. Students who chew gum will perform worse in exams than students who do not. Now let's move on to interpretations. Interpretations are similar to inferences but focus on whether a conclusion logically follows from a statement rather than what conclusions are likely to follow from a statement. Here, critical thinkers are interpreting statements to reveal logically sound information. For example, if it's made clear that there can only be white and black swans in the world, an interpretation of the statement would be there is no such thing as a green swan. In the critical thinking test, interpretation questions are statements followed by 3 interpretations. You must decide whether an interpretation is true, yes, or false, no. Rather than point out how likely a claim is to be true, all you need to do here is state whether the interpretation follows from the statement or not. Here's a statement as well as some interpretations. At the beginning of September 2015, the government launched its programme to improve learning at A-level across the country. The goal was to improve A-level results between A star and C by at least 20% between 2015 and 2016. The number of students scoring between a C and an A star in their A levels rose from 50% in 2015 to 75% in 2016. The number of students scoring U had dropped from 15% to 12%. And between E and D, the scores were down from 45% to a meagre 13%. Interpretation 1. The government have been successful in this programme. Interpretation 2. The government's goals have been achieved or exceeded. Interpretation 3. Students who would have likely achieved between a D or an E were now achieving A star to C. Now let's talk about deductions. Deductions are slightly similar to interpretations, but are stricter in their logical format. Valid deductive arguments are arguments which, if all of the premises are true, then the conclusion cannot be false. Here's an example of a valid deductive argument. Premise 1, the book is on the shelf. Premise 2, if the book is on the shelf, then it is not on the floor. Conclusion, therefore, the book is not on the floor. This is true because if both premises 1 and 2 are true, then the conclusion must also be true. Remember that an argument can be deductively valid even if the conclusion is false, so as long as at least one premise is also false. So, it's clear that deductive arguments aren't so concerned with what's true or false, but rather what's invalid or valid. For the critical thinking test, you need to approach the questions in the same way. You'll be presented with a statement which contains the premises of an argument. You'll have to choose the deductions which are correct, therefore creating a deductively valid argument. For each, you must answer yes or no. Here's an example of a deduction question. Some objects with 4 wheels are cars. All cars possess a steering wheel. This object has 4 wheels but no steering wheel. Therefore, deduction 1, this object is a car. Deduction 2, this object is not a car. And deduction 3, this object is a bicycle. Now let's move on to the evaluation of arguments. Along with the 4 aforementioned skills that a critical thinker needs to possess, it's important to be able to evaluate arguments in a more general sense. Critical thinkers need to be able to figure out how strong an argument is by comparing it to the information it's based on. This can be slightly more abstract than the previous areas we've covered. In all of the question types so far, the answers have been relatively straightforward, with little room for ambiguity or debate. Here, what constitutes a strong or weak argument usually depends on how relevant the argument is, how well supported it is by the statement, and whether or not it avoids argumentative fallacies. In the critical thinking test, you'll be given a statement or question alongside 3 arguments made based on it. Your task will be to decide whether these arguments are strong or weak. Take a look at this sample evaluation of arguments question. Should private schools be taxed more heavily to pay for state school pupils' meals? Argument 1, yes, those children are going hungry. Argument 2, no, big business should be taxed instead of private schools. Taxing private schools will reduce their incentive to provide a good service and could lower the quality of teaching. Argument 3, no, we live in a free market and therefore the private schools deserve the profits they make. That's just the way it is. Answers to all of these sample questions will be available in the next video. Please click the like button if you've enjoyed watching the video, and don't forget to subscribe to the channel to get alerted when I've created a new video. Also, if you would like free access to our critical thinking online test questions, click the link below right now and you can get practicing. Thanks for watching.